I wanna be the best in the game, invest in my name. Check no restraints, I'm obsessed with the pain. I ingest, I retain, assess and I change. Possessed by the thought I'll be free one day from society's restraints. Money, clout and fame, mud, disease, a plague. We all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name. All our insecurities are on display. This is war with the enemy. Think that it was meant to be. Living in a time where disease is on every screen.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Tactical Awareness. This is Season 1, Episode 3 of our continuing journey of exploring some of the fundamentals of Corvus Belli's Infinity N4. My name's Ash, and I'm joined today by my two friends, Owen and Dan, as we continue to go through sort of in the order that a player would do them, the fundamentals of getting ready to play a game of Infinity. We started off in Episode 1 with some core list building fundamentals like knowing what your models can do and what you've chosen them for, assigning some roles and building combat groups. Our second episode is all about fire teams and how to introduce them into your games of Infinity N4. And today we're going to talk about how to read a mission and add that third layer before you play a game. So understanding what your goals are, what the parameters you're playing under are, how to assign and build a proper list to do that. So let's jump in and see what's been going on with everybody and tackle missions in Infinity. Hey everybody, and welcome to Understanding Missions in Infinity. Owen actually, I think, was the one that suggested this. This was the kind of the logical next step. So if we're doing this in the order you as a hobbyist or a player would do it, if you sit down and you're writing an army list, you're including the models you want to use in your fire teams. Well, this is step 3. You're getting ready to play the game. And we wanted to jump in and go over what that looks like from the point of view of writing and reading missions. But before we get too far into that, we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about what's been going on with us and what's new with us in Infinity. So let's go in with Dan. Dan actually just came from playing a game like just now in TTS. So why don't you tell us about your week, man?
I got a couple of games in. One against Owen, where I learned how not to do things with fire teams after we learned about it last week. And then, tried the tabletop simulator with a much newer player where it was mostly just explaining rules and going over things. And it's a weird experience on tabletop simulator. It's almost harder to figure out line of sight at the beginning of like vectors and stuff of like trying to look around. It's just a bit weird. It's not as intuitive. I'm sure if you play it more, you'd get used to it. But it's better than not playing. So there's that.
And you get to like go through and like do rules interactions and like really like hone your understanding of the rules, because you can just create scenarios that you want to experiment with just on the fly whenever you feel like, which is awesome.
And this is a guy who lives in a different time zone in Canada that is kind of just off by himself and for work, and he doesn't get to play any games with anybody. So it's nice to be able to include him and play some games. And so when he's back in a few months, he'll be up to snuff and have some stuff painted and be able to jump right in.
Oh, that's awesome! You guys basically just like remotely recruited a new gaming buddy to play Infinity with. That's wicked.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The joys of the internet. So, what did you work on, like hobby wise? What did you get painted this week?
Hobby wise, I worked on a few dudes. I didn't get tons painted, I don't think, but just a few more coats. I was experimenting with some colors. I think I'm just gonna have them all the separate colors of like the camo thing. They're kind of just so you can say like, this kappa is this kind of kappa, this kappa, and then you just remember. So it's just like the
color coded.
It's just it just with the crazy different colors. Then when you're substituting them in games, it's just a lot easier to remember which one's which.
Kind of like the skills rings in Blood Bowl, so you could tell who had what skills.
Yeah,
a lot of people
like
use
that
on their bases. Yeah, so you can tell who your blockers are and who your blotters and stuff are.
Little elastic rings everywhere.
Yeah, little elastic rings on all your specialists. That's a cool idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Sweet. So what about you? You got a game with your newly painted JSA that you got painted during the recording of the last podcast. You went from 0 to painted.
Yeah, I played I think 4 games this week with the Saturday game day that takes place at Sentry Box here. I think I lost all of them except for the one against Dan, and even the one against Dan was racing to the L. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know that he should not try and face up the shotguns. That one was a loss as well. So I don't know. I didn't have much to take away from them other than it's like I like the bikes. That's kind of it.
JSA's got kind of a steep curve. It's funny because they are in most factions when you build an army, right? You can kind of like dip back and go like, this sectorial is not really working for me. Maybe I'll play like the hyperpower version of this. Maybe I'll play like the vanilla version. But because JSA are no longer part of a hyperpower faction, they're just an N2A. You don't really have anywhere to go. Like I guess you can play a Kari company, maybe if you want to. I think they get some JSA stuff, don't they? But you can't
maybe.
really. I think they're the only like fallback you have. Otherwise, it's just this is what you get. JSA is JSA, and there's no other like there's no other version of this army that you get to play ever. So you kind of just have what you have, and you got to work with it. And their gimmick is like the camo and the melee and weird heavy infantry.
Like, the heavy infantries are all the same, which is weird. In like they're ostensibly all the same 6-2 armor 3 run fight melee mediocre shooting for heavy infantry. Like they hit 13s ish. And then the two gimmicks that are in it that are unique in my opinion is the harassing bikes and bikes in general, and then the ninjas and Oniwabans. And so like I'll probably not play them as much as I originally thought I was going to, other than when I'm like, I want to play motorcycles or I want to play ninjas, and that'll be it. And it's like, I don't care about playing you as a heavy infantry faction because you're like fine. You're not
well,
like,
they're not really
wow,
they so can't fight other heavy infantry. That's the thing, is like they all have like you have like an occasional Spitfire. You have like an occasional Spitfire. Well, no, because you have all of this like up close brawly stuff. So you're leaning into that like 2 wounds to drop like chain rifles, or to drop like, because they all have like chain rifles, and some of them have shotguns, right? The Domers are all on with chain rifles. The Tankos are like incredibly cheap. You know what I mean? Like
except for Katakuri. I will also come back to play Katakuri.
Katakuri, yeah. Katakuri are fantastic, yeah. But like your sort of like core heavy infantry, the Domarus and the Tankos are just, they don't fall into like the typical like we're here to fight other heavy infantry. They're these kind of weird mid-range brawly. They have SMGs and Blitzens or shotguns. They have like flaming spears. And then other than that, it's just like pistols or monofilamental weapons. But you're paying 18 points for like a 2 wound, shock immune, martial arts, dodge, like CC-23 guy with a missile launcher. You know, like or sorry, I guess the
missile launcher who can't take cover, which is like they're neat. It's something different.
No, Tankos can take cover. They don't. It's the Domers that have frenzy. Tankos don't have frenzy. They're just fun. They have courage and stealth in them. Oh no, they do have impetuous. Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah,
it's at the end there. I didn't see it.
Yeah,
and you can't get rid of it. I mean, if they're in a fire team, they can take cover.
You could fire team them in a very competitive Harris market.
Yeah, that's true, because you want that Harris for the one. But I think your other option is with those miniatures, you can play a Kari company, and they have a few units. Yeah, the Daioke's in there, the Tankos are in there, but then you can mix in like Wuming, Druze, Brawlers. You can use Pathfinders and Sierras. You get all the Pano, Rems, Yojimbo, Karakuri in there.
I have a completely unrelated question though. Can you have a PAL bot if you're a camo marker? So long as you're an engineer or doctor?
I don't know, actually.
I couldn't find anything to stop you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case.
Which engineer can enter a marker state that you can think of?
The Caliban in Shazvasti.
The Caliban.
I question this.
I don't see why not.
I've been thinking about running a Caliban with a PAL bot or a slave in Shazvasti. Because he's got Protheon martial arts. And if you bring a PAL bot, you get +1 burst on melee.
Yeah. And you just coordinate the PAL bots in to give yourself like the extra burst bonus, because you're doing basically like a coordinated melee.
And so you have a DA coordinated melee martial art Protheon attack.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, absolutely. It's
purely like, gimmick. But like, or you can use it to bait mines, which is normally the Caliban's weakness because he's only got the 1 wound until he eats somebody. I don't know. But I was trying to figure out whether or not, because like
That's a
all
good
the
one
other
for...
attachments are tied to like the same state, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of one where I can't think of another one where you'd be in a marker state besides a Caliban.
I couldn't
That's
find
never
it.
come up for me. Yeah, so I don't know. That's crazy. That's definitely an interesting like gimmick, and especially like when you combine that with the melee and Protheon, that could definitely have some interesting effects if you can do it. Let me...
And on an advanced deploy camo state, your
So
ability to get into melee is much higher.
yeah, well, it wouldn't... I don't think they share the peripheral doesn't share your deployment options, so it
No,
would still
but
be back in your
it's
deployment zone.
fast too, right?
Sure,
Like,
yeah, and it's mimicking your order every single time too.
yeah.
So it's able to like come after you, and it's a peripheral. No, it's a... That's G
Yep,
jumper.
peripheral servant.
That's right, peripheral. So I'm just looking where the peripheral skill is. Presence, Protheon, peripheral, page 107. That's an interesting question. Owen with the... It doesn't say I can't. Okay, so requirements is where we should be able to see this. Peripheral is an automatic skill, effects, deployed in the game table, sometimes a controller. Always activate the same order as their controller, executing the same short skills. If any of the game elements controller does not meet the requirements of the skill of the order, then they idle. Each trooper must choose only one of the troopers, whether the controller is peripheral to be activated by that order. So only one of them would get activated the same order during the reactive turn. Do the same thing. Yeah. Peripheral control, because these are G servant. The special skill allows the controllers with the doctors and engineers to use their thing and not in solo contract. Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to. Where's the cancellation? No, I think you can. I think you absolutely can. I don't see anything in here unless like the red box has like a thing that prohibits it.
Neat.
Yeah, I think you can. And I mean, even if you couldn't, you could just not use your camo state to get into melee. Maybe get into melee some other way. Do you have like smoke grenades or something like that? Maybe you could use.
I don't think he has smoke grenades.
No, he's just
they're in the
waiting
faction
camo to do it.
but...
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. The audience maybe will know better than we do. That's
Anyway,
interesting. So
that's what I've been thinking about.
That's what you've been thinking about. Different say things and different things you can lean in with your shots. Vasty, sweet. Well, for me, I got inspired by Owen completely painting a JSR army in the time it took to record the last podcast. So I finished off that Daikini with the combi rifle. So I got some fire team operations, my Shukra with counterintelligence, so that I have a chain of command in my army as well, so that my Asura can go and have Asura times shooting things with their multi-rifle and blowing up people's brains with Trinity. And then my Yadu NCO. So if I do want to make that fire team with Parvati, we can still move around using those lieutenant orders and not have it break the fire team. And that gives me like a solid base of models for my OSS. My order key has been hovering over ordering another box of remotes too, so that I can have a second Daleth and a second, or maybe just a missile bot in the army as well, to do like a hacking net, because I do have a few quality hackers in there, and being able to expand a hacking net and drop some guided missiles for a few points. I'm not using a ton of SWC. I'm taking the Asura, and that means that calling in fire support should probably be an option for this list for 16 extra points, or 17 points for the missile launcher. Doesn't seem like a reason not to do it. I also prepped 5 more boards for Winter War, which means I went and bought some MDF and hinged them all, and I got to source some tablecloths and 10 cards, because we're up to 17 out of 20. We're getting close to filling up. It's going to be fun. I'm really excited for this tournament. I think Mark from Schooner Labs just shipped all the swag and the dice trays and everything too, and it's all coming together. It's going to be the first Infinity event I've run since, it looks like, late 2018 was the last tournament I did, and then 2019 I was running like a league at the end of that year. I think I ran one tournament in 2019, and then of course the pandemic happens. This will be the first one I've run in 3 years. I'm pretty pumped for it. I'm going to do a little corrections from the last episode. We had a few people shared just a few things that we got a bit wrong. The lively discussion about Discover. I was reading the Discover skill when we recorded this show, and it said it was a movement skill, a short movement skill, but didn't notice that it doesn't actually have the movement tag, which is weirdly cognitively dissonant. So that whole advice I gave people about discovering with 5 models doesn't work, because it's a short movement skill that doesn't have the movement tag. So that does trigger certain advantages to being a short movement skill. I'm sure there's like a mechanical reason for it not having the movement tag.
Isn't it not now? Because it doesn't have the movement tag? I have no idea.
No, it's a short movement skill, but does not have the movement tag, which makes it ineligible. So the fire team leader in a fire team will perform it, but not everybody else because it does not have the movement tag, even though it is a short movement skill. I can't think of any other examples of a short movement skill that doesn't have the movement tag. But this is one of them. So we got to cut that. There was a couple times I mentioned that at a full composition bonus at 5 models would gain you a +3 to your whip checks for discover rolls. It actually is gained at +3. At 4 models, but only if the fire team's pure. And then we used a bit of language from the previous edition, which some people commented on. We called them link teams, which is a N2 and N3 term. They are now just called fire teams. So the term link, if you hear us use it, it's because we still all have MicroArt Studios and Warsenal tokens that say link leader on them. So we still probably use the term link because lots of our gaming accessories still have N2 and N3 language on them. And it's going to happen. So sorry, fire teams are links. Links are fire teams. It's an old term, but they can be used interchangeably. And that's kind of it, I think, for the main things that we might have slipped up in on the fire team episode. But overall, lots of great comments and sort of like experiential sort of sharing that happened in Discords and on the website after that about fire teams. They are a fairly confusing new player experience, and so some people were sharing out there that they wanted more on it, basically, that they really liked the discussion about the duos and the Harris teams, and that they hadn't thought specifically about the duos, and like the example teams was really useful, and they'd like to hear us do when we do future episodes, if we do like a faction breakdown, doing like the three of us get together and think of like, what's the best Harris we could make, what's the best duo we could make, what would it go and do, how would that relate to like roles. That seemed to be really popular, and lots of people were asking like, hey, this is the army I play, what would be good duos in that army? So it definitely
sounds
got
like they're
thinking.
lazy.
I mean, everyone wants a net list, right? Everybody wants to get the answer up front, and then everyone also asked for Owen's double Maggie duo list. And I got real close. I took a stab at what I thought he was talking about, and I was off by, what was I off by? I had 3 Gulams and you had 5, I think.
Yeah, you brought more remotes, whereas I like that 5-man core Ghoulie team and sleeping on the backfield. They get a lot of work done despite doing nothing.
That's right. I brought a hacking net, and you brought Gulams to like hold the backfield
and throw grenades.
Yeah, and check. That's right. With your
NCO grenade. NCO grenade. NCO grenade.
I love how you're willing to die on the hill for the NCO grenade, because it's basically just like a free order. No one else takes that except for you, but it's like your favorite part about that little fire team.
Every game it's ever been in, it's killed a model.
Eventually, 3 chances to roll a 1. If you can get that 1, you can land it anywhere on the table. Basically,
it's better than 1. Like he's shooting out a 13 -6. Like he does his job.
Yeah, I mean, you could, if you wanted to touch like the extreme edges, it goes to like -6, doesn't it? So you'd be on 13 -12, right? It's a 1. But I'm just saying you can hit anywhere on the table on a 1. So if you really need to yellow somebody, you want to take a chance, you're really gonna kill that lieutenant. And if you get 3 chances to roll 1 and kill the lieutenant, you could just cripple a guy for a turn too. It's just fun if guys are sleeping on rooftops. All right, well, let's dive in then. Understanding missions in Infinity. There's going to be a couple of like sort of like caveats. We're going to front load some stuff here before we dive into this. The first one's a callback warning, just like in episodes 1 and 2. We're going to refer to like things like roles and fire teams concepts during this episode. And that comes from season 1, episodes 1 and 2. So if you find these terms confusing, check out those episodes before you go any further on. So when we talk about stuff, we do break down those things in the first 2 episodes here. And then I'm going to make a note about HVTs and classified objectives. These are things that come up a lot in the ITS tournament packet, but in formatting this episode, I'm making a conscious decision to not include a full breakdown of high-value targets and classifieds in ITS. I want these episodes to stay sort of evergreen, and these things are maybe not present in all missions, especially direct action missions, which in my opinion is the best place to begin Infinity. And they're entirely subject to change or removal in the future, unlike the core mission structure from the rulebook. So as long as we're playing N4, That core mission structure in the rulebook's probably going to stay the same. But the classifieds and HVT stuff goes up and down, and some missions just don't even use them. So it seemed wisest to put discussion of them into like a separate episode so that the fundamentals can kind of stand alone and folks can absorb like the core, how do you read a mission and prep to play, and not be sort of like bogged down in the details. So we will get to that stuff in the future, and we will reference it in the future. But it seemed like it was worth not focusing on and not talking too much about the specifics of, because that way this episode can stay hopefully useful for some time. Did that make sense, Dan? Like why we're not going to talk about that? Because you've played with them now, but I felt like parsing that stuff out means that if another ITS pack comes out during N4 and they've changed, then we're not referring to a whole bunch of stuff that's no longer relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think they're super complicated, but at the same time, whatever.
All right, fair enough. It's also information that's not contained in the rulebook, right? So the description about HVTs and classifieds are contained in the ITS document, and so they can stand alone as their own separate thing. We could do like a future episode talking about them. And they are like a whole separate thing you have to prep for that makes things confusing. So focusing on stuff that is more linearly sort of like presented and is presented in the core rules just felt right. So let's get into missions then. So why are missions important? Infinity's a game where like the default win condition is always going to be to stop your opponent from being able to participate by removing all their pieces. And every model in the game, with very few exceptions, has some ability to do this, to kill other models. While on a very basic level, it can be argued that a great many missions in Infinity can be accomplished by this route as well. Missions allow the designers of the game more ways to make units interesting by having them able to contribute in other, more dynamic ways. A variety of goals instead of like one linear path to victory adds a ton to a game system. Dynamic or changing goals like the classifieds and HVTs that I referred to earlier. They also put pressure on singular list designs from them becoming like too prominent, and allow the various factions to have different strengths and weaknesses at different times. If everything was just, won through killing and removing pieces the fastest, the faction that could do that the best would probably be the one that wins. But because the missions can change and have different sort of changing goals, then you have like a constant need to adapt and reassess. And this is one of the things that makes Infinity so unique and interesting over time. The same armies will approach the 21 missions that are in ITS 14 really differently by bringing different tools. And even the table itself can make a game feel drastically different from one playthrough to the next simply by resetting where the objectives are in relation to the actual board itself, the buildings, the cover, the terrain, what you can see. We could probably do an entire episode just on like the various styles of missions that are presented in every season of the ITS packet, but it probably would not be that useful like long term. So instead today, let's talk about how to read and prepare for a mission, like a singular mission, and then give an example set that like each of us can talk about. Does that make sense?
Cool.
Okay. All right. So part one, the goals. That's what you're trying to do. Every mission in Infinity has a set of goals. The ones we've picked out here are from the mission called Annihilation. And it's the simplest mission. Annihilation, your goal is to kill as many victory points of models as you can while preserving as many of your own forces as possible. And in a way, it's like kind of almost an unmission in Infinity because it leans almost completely into the combat mechanics. But don't let that fool you. There's still plenty to consider when preparing for it, like as opposed to simply playing kill everyone until they're dead. So how do you prepare a list to accomplish the goals that are in here? And the goals are in a 300-point standard game of Infinity to kill between 75 and 150 points of enemy army points, to kill between 151 and 250 enemy army points, and to kill more than 250 enemy army points. So half of the mission, if you do the first one, it's 1 objective point. The second one, it's 3. The last one, it's 4. So if you almost table your opponent, you get 4 objective points. Almost half the mission points are going to be just killing. But the other half is, if you have up to 75 to 150 surviving ones, you get a point in your own army. If you have between 151 and 250 surviving victory points, you get 3. And if you have more than 250 surviving victory points in models, you get 4. So the other half of scoring is you have to kill as much as you can while preserving as many of your forces as you can. And that's where this becomes sort of more dynamic. And the last one, the final mission for 2 points, is kill the enemy lieutenant. You have to find and kill the hidden model that is leading the opposing force. So while you have access in your chosen faction to things that can kill, like in every army, what that is going to vary dramatically between different armies. So let's break down some simple questions. So like for the first part, if you need to kill enemy models to score 4 to 10 objective points, here's some things you might want to consider. Can I create the best odds of killing success by using gunfighters that stack like modifiers? Can I win an engagement efficiently so I don't waste orders trying to kill things over and over again, right? Getting that red haze and dumping orders into a single gunfight. And can I incorporate backup plans in case luck goes against me, or am I defending instead of attacking by going second? So what do you think about those questions, Dan? So what's an example of like a unit that can create the best odds of killing by like stacking modifiers? Because there's a million different modifiers in Infinity. Some come from range, some come from skills, some comes from like the conditions you're in. What's like an example that maybe in your 12 army that's good at hunting and killing other pieces because of modifiers?
I mainly think of 2 models. One being the Epsilon, just because it's got MSV2, so I can ignore all the mimetism from those hard to kill stuff that may be out in the open or kind of hiding around corners. And then you can also stack smoke with them to like drop smoke with a ranging guard and then just pummel people at like long distance corners.
Yeah, force them to have modifiers against them with that -6. You impose a modifier on them.
Right. But then also ignore their modifiers.
Yeah.
And then you can either do like the sniper rifle or the HMG. Against super high armor targets, it still might be tough, but you just roll lots of dice and hopefully it goes well.
The HMG is a bit worse against high armor targets.
Right.
The sniper rifle, though, can even impose another modifier, and so can the HMG by sitting out of range. You pick fights with guys who are at bad range to you, right? Yeah. So like the best an HMG can do is if it's sitting in that over 16 range band, right? When it fights a gun, someone who's got like a mid-range gun, like or over 24 if it's like a Spitfire. So that again, you're stacking all the way up to that -12. You're always trying to hit that -12 to keep you safe and try and make them make as many saves as possible by just landing as many hits as you can.
They also have climbing plus, so they can kind of get to where they want to without too much difficulty.
Get the angle. Yeah.
So that's nice. And,
sorry, go on.
And then maybe the beta trooper as well. They have like a lot of different options, and just having the structure too allows you to kind of eat a mine or fail at one thing as you're going around killing stuff, and you don't instantly go down. Like the Epsilon's great, but that random, I need a 3 to hit you, and then they roll a 3, and then
or a 4. You never know.
Or a 4. It's actually so the game against Owen, rolling like 5 dice against 3, he needed a 4 to hit me, and he rolled a 4. And then the game I just played, the guy needed a 3 to hit me. He rolled a 3, and the Epsilon goes down.
It stalled you. Yeah.
And so the crit is always a chance. And so having 2 structure as the beta, also with climbing plus, being able to run around in Harris's or whatever, allows you to that kind of like that. If there's one bad roll, he can maybe survive it.
I guess that third question there, can I incorporate a backup plan? Having 2 wound guys who are going to be like your killing pieces, that gives you that ability to like not go down that first time you lose, you get unlucky or get that like critical hit against you. Yeah. So what about that winning efficiently question? So you're not wasting orders and orders, because it sucks when you win a gunfight, but then you don't drop them. And there's certain weapons that you can kind of use to offset that. The first thing that comes to my mind is double action, right? Or explosive or shock. Things that can circumvent skills like no wound incapacitation or heavy armor just by making them roll extra dice with double action or explosive, or AP rounds. What about you, Owen? What's some like efficient weapons, like even just in the equipment section that you might look at when you're trying to make sure that when you kill things the first time you go into a fight with them?
I mean, the MGs are the way to go. If you can find any kind of heavy machine gun, the variants, the better. So your AP HMG, your multi HMG, your T2. I don't know if there's a T2 HMG still, but
no, there's T2 sniper rifle still though on the Blackjacks, T2 heavy shotguns.
Yeah, so like ammo types, monofilament, stuff like that. And then all that matters is just like putting it on the right chassis. Like what unit are you going to use it? Like I personally like the camo marker suppressing as my way to deal with stuff, because then it's costing my opponent usually more than 1 order and they might die. And then other than that, it's bringing the optimal gun, whether it's AP or shock or breaker or viral, those ones that don't come up as often. But
yeah, that's an interesting big brain thing you just said though. By making your opponent kill themselves running into you. You can make those traps. I've seen you make those traps before with smoke and stuff like that. You'll throw a grenade around a corner, smoke a corner so people don't have line of sight to you, go set up behind cover with something and then suppress in line of fire when that smoke goes away of like 3 or 4 models, and then you've not basically forced the gunfight yourself and spent your own orders creating that gunfight. You've just trapped someone in a really disadvantageous scenario where if any of them activate, they're now you're for free without you spending your own orders, basically getting that engagement, maybe getting those kills. That's a sneaky way of being efficient. I think that's a cool like thought, like your Sun Duckbutt, your new favorite, your new favorite robot friend. I'm imagining him as being like a cool trap you could use in Hakaslam with smoke, like in combination with smoke to try and efficiently kill. And
He doesn't need the smoke. Guys. He just advanced deploy camo. He doesn't need anything. He does it all himself.
I just
all
mean
the
like
work that you might have to do isn't even there. You're just like, I put these 2 markers down. One of them's gonna kill you.
one of them's Metal Gear.
Well, joke's on you. Neither of them were him. That was actually a hacker.
I just mean that trap where like you force the engagement later. You know what I mean? Where like you get people in line of fire and get yourself there, or you use your new favorite thing, the old dodge trick, dodge around a corner, stay in line of fire.
Yeah, that's great. Really love that. Really love that.
Owen learning the nuances of active turn dodging has led to some frustrations.
Yeah.
So anyway, so definitely things like tags, mobile heavy infantry, airdrop troops and stack modifiers like minimatism or like surprise and stuff. They're all like good answers to these questions being effective, and the right equipment goes a long way too. So the second objective then, to lose as few victory points in your own force as possible. You could consider things like, can I take gunfighters with special skills and make them harder to kill? Right. So things like total immunity. We're talking about your Karakuri there earlier. Even just having 2 wounds, like, is a huge deal, like Dan said earlier with the beta troopers. Or can I take support pieces that can help get troops back in the fight if they do lose a fight? I talked about that, having Parvati in a Harris team with Mayasura. If she wants to go use her MSV3 and her multi-rifle to go hunt something down and it goes badly for her, Parvati is a preeminent doctor and can just bring her back with all of her wounds. And then can I avoid taking troops with skills that increase their victory point count, like baggage, so deaths don't count against me further? One of the things that Owen's double mag list would struggle with is he's actually giving up 40 extra points on those 2 Magariba guards if they happen to go down. And that's a significant chunk of free points that your opponent can score just by killing those 2 models, simply by virtue of them having baggage.
If they happen to go down.
If they happen to go, yeah. Confident they won't, but there you go. So what are some gunfight? Like, what are some other special skills that would make harder to kill gunfighters? I can think of a couple, but what about you, Dan? What you can think of that's some things that might make guys a bit tougher to put down and minimize your own losses?
I guess for gunfighter, I mean, high armor is always good. Obviously, looking for high armor and maybe even high BTS. Just because there's lots of different weapons that can attack you. The total immunity is really good. With the bronze, I got hit by a monofilament weapon, and I was like, I got total immunity. I didn't instantly die.
I don't think it actually works against monofilament.
Oh, it really does.
Actually does.
Does it now?
This came up on Saturday.
Oh, really? I thought it didn't work against. It's not. Those used to be considered exotic. I didn't think it worked against mono. It works against mono now, eh?
It does. It also it works against effect. It works against T2 as well, and it also works against K1.
Cool.
So K1 combis are no longer the way to deal with it, because it read the whole paragraph. I read the first line and thought I was right, but I was not.
Right. That's awesome. So they're immune to monofilamental. Wow, take that, Bears. The Bears are coming.
The Bears are even stronger.
The Bears are even stronger. Here come the Bears. That's great. I was thinking of even just marker states, like getting into a fight and then transforming back into a marker. So using your killing pieces, be they melee or shooting. We're talking about gunfighters a lot, but killing pieces is probably a better example in this case. And transforming back into a marker state when you're done after you finished your killing. It makes them immune to things like, getting spotlighted without being discovered first, to have like a missile dropped on them, or being hacked if they're a hacker. killer hackers. Those were some skills that I thought about. Just being able to enter back into, there's another layer of additional defense was an important one.
Question: If I have like a impersonation 2 marker that counts as a friendly to the enemy, but then one of my guys is targeted, can they drop a missile on him if the template covers the impersonation marker?
I don't believe so, because it counts as a friendly model.
Yeah, so there you go.
You can include you can hit a camo marker, because a camo marker is canceled if it's touched by a template. And if there's an eligible target in range, you can attack that eligible target and then accidentally splash the camo marker, I believe, and that would cancel the camo state. But an impersonation marker counts, I believe, as a friendly trooper, so it would cancel the attack, because you're afraid to danger close the little old lady crossing the street over there, because you think it's somebody that's not supposed to be in the engagement zone. There was a couple of
that's a good defense against like missile bots of like you get targeted, and the killer hackers get more value if there's not stuff to murder other.
That's right. Exactly. You pretend to be some like non-com basically hiding next to them, and then they won't call missiles in. I believe that is the case, because you count as being a friendly model. So what about support pieces then? Those are the pieces that can bring people back to life, or even defend against people who have maybe been neutralized, like immobilized, paralyzed, isolated. There's lots of ways you can be taken out of the fight and made non-effective. The first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is doctors, engineers. What's your O12's answer to this?
I just ignore it and hope for the best so far, but it's weird. Sometimes I really wish I had a doctor or an engineer, and other times
you can take Parvati.
I know
she's in your faction.
So the one time I took Parvati, it didn't matter at all. She was just a waste of points, and so it's tricky because it's very situational with these support pieces. But I guess with like if you're going for killing mission and there's a lot of like heavy support like gun stuff like on roofs, if they go down, they're no longer, if they only get hit like the one time and they can't be seen again, then having the high value points there, even if you have less orders, might be worth it because it's harder to remove them. And then having the doctor engineer there to pick them back up after they've spent so much time bringing them down could be really good value.
Yeah, if you're going to take Parvati, it's worth investing in 2 Yud bots to put with her, because she can just go off on merry ways, and she's very mobile at 6'2" movement. She has super jump. But 2 little 3-point Yud bots sitting next to, like, if you have like a defensive hitting piece like an Epsilon, or if you have your Gamma, hanging out somewhere with an HMG or a Fearbach, she doesn't have to go get to them. You know what I mean? They just have their own little sleeper guy. They can go put them back together. Or if you're falling around that Beta Troopers fire team, because I think she's a whip 18 or something like that to fix structure, because she's got a whip bonus to her
she does.
repair rolls. And then for the Gamma, he can just go unconscious and then come back with 2 wounds, because she's Dr. 2 wounds. She just brings him all the way back to completely fully healed. There's lots of like examples that the Sofatekas and Dr. Worm, the Medtech Obsidon Medcanoid. Did I get that right? I didn't even look at it, so I think.
Wait, is that the real name of Dr. Worm?
I think that is, yeah, the Medtech Obsidon Medcanoid, because we tried to say this last time, remember, and it was just an absolute nightmare of a word to try and say.
From here and henceforth be called Dr. Worm.
Dr. Worm, yeah, we call him Dr. Worm. He went to school for a long time. Let me just see if I got it right. I think I did. The Medtech Obsidon Medcanoid. Yeah, I did get it right. I can't believe I actually remembered that from last week. It's such a stupid name. Such a word salad of a name. Yeah, good examples if you want to be like, they're not super points efficient, because you may or may not need them, but they, if you're playing a game where you're trying to preserve points, it's typically not super efficient ever to bring someone back to life. Owen's always talked about a philosophy of, well, just don't die. I'm spending orders on coming back to life. I'm wasting orders. Just don't die instead. But in this mission in particular, you could swing the game. Like if you bring a 40-point guy back to life, you could swing the scoring way back in your favor all of a sudden, right? So,
or a 60-point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like my Asura coming back to life at 67 points can massively swing the scoring in a single order. So it's almost worth having that option sort of like following you around. And then it's just being the baggage thing. I think it's just about being conscious, like keep yourself sort of like mindful of the fact that Magritte card is an extra. He's, what is it, 88 points? He has 128 points. They're as expensive as avatars if they happen to die. Because you're looking at a big swing all of a sudden. Oh, sorry, they're 108 points. That's right, because they're 20 extra points each.
Now, is there the argument to maybe take a less order heavy list? You get to do less, but then it's harder to kill.
Yes and no. I actually there's also like there's also an argument to. I mean, yes, that's a tactic. I shouldn't say yes and no. That's a tactic for sure. But then each of your individual pieces also becomes more order efficient for your opponent to kill. So if your opponent can find a good pairing to hunt a particular piece, like let's say you have a 40-point Oni, or Owen's got his 40-point Oni Wabon, and you send your Epsilon on a merry mission to go kill him, right? You've gotten a less point value model that's traded its points up. And so I think there's also the argument to taking little 7-point template-y, piece traders. Because like if you send, let's say, a Highlander army Galwegian with a chain rifle, he's like 5 points. But he's got good whip and he's got a chain rifle, and you just, do the favorite thing. You dodge him around the corner and the line of sight of that Oni Wabon, and then you make your whip check to intuit attack at him, even though he's a camo marker. That 5-point guy might kill a 41-point guy. And then even if he dies, you don't care. Right? Like you're more than happy to lose a 5-point warband guy in exchange for, snake eyes. It's just, if you're just going to blow him away with the chain rifle, and you've traded up at that point, you've gotten your value out of that individual model. So I think there is, yes, I think but I think that math changes in every faction. Right. So for you, that math might be different than it might be like with a Highlander army, where they have access to those 5-point things, those warbands, or taigas. Owen's throwing 8 taigas at me game after game in N3, where they would almost all, like every single one of those taigas, if only half of them actually made contact with the enemy and killed a model, they were typically killing models 3 to 4 times their point value, right? So he's trading 40 points worth of taigas, and if they kill one 40-point model, you probably traded those 40 points worth of taigas for 80 to 100 points every game you played with them, because you just can't stop them fast enough, and they just suicide themselves into stuff.
I mean, geez, even just the benefit from the order efficiency, like how much work you have to put in to get rid of them all. Because like they just run up and they stand there. And they're like, yeah, I might die.
But I might kill you.
And if I do, oh well.
So I think that computation changes faction by faction, and what's your most efficient way of building, surviving and killing is going to be based on your sort of unique ingredients. Now, these are the questions you can ask yourself, and the answers are going to be different between you, me, and Owen, because we play different factions and we have different things to consider. So special skills you might want to consider for like staying alive are things like immunity shock, keep your troops from skipping the unconscious step, and there's a chance to get revived. Killer hackers and hacking plus, being able to go into a marker state can give you an additional layer of protection, and avoid things like hacking or fairware attacks from the Toha, who can just kill you through walls. And then like 8-point support bots could be probably avoided in these missions too. And you got to watch out for those things you might forget about baggage, like we said, the Magritte guard, and they could be a liability and a big target. So the final objective is to kill the enemy lieutenant. And while identifying this model can be relatively simple, it could be like a process of elimination of who's eligible in the open information. Like if you look on the models and go, well, there's these models and only 2 of them have a lieutenant profile, one of these guys needs to be lieutenant. It can often be like difficult to get to them. So you should consider things like, if you can't get there without passing by defenses, can you include a model that starts nearby or can easily travel them, like impersonation models, camo CC pieces, or like gunfighters? Can you attack them without line of fire, like spec fire and grenades, guided weapons, and spotlight with like repeaters and ferroware? And how will you keep your own lieutenant from falling victim in the same way? So what's some ways? Owen's obviously, this is your JSA jam. How can you circumvent the defenses and try and go and kill the enemy lieutenant?
I mean, Oni Wabons will just do it, right? Like you go, I bring the guy who starts on your half of the board and you don't see that he's there. and then he walks over and touches you and you go away. Or a speculo killer, or insert your faction's version. Is it Van Zant? Is it the Morad drop troop? Like, pick your poison of piece that can get into the opponent's deployment zone and kill them without, unless your opponent has set up like an effective bubble around it.
Or made you choose between two. There's always the two Gulam Lieutenant options, or you know what I mean, like two guys sleeping on two rooftops very far away, and you gotta roll the dice on who's who.
And no matter what with those, you always kill the model.
That's right. Yeah, why not? If you've killed a guy or moved an order, so you're not behind.
Yep.
So if you don't have access to those things like you do, then Dan, what are some things you could do to try and to get that guy, if he's not even in line of fire, like hunt him down?
I'm thinking maybe Cyber Ghost Killer Hacker with a missile bot, and then another hacker, and then the Cyber Ghost can go impersonation state or whatever, go up, yeet a repeater, and then you can spotlight a bunch of things and then missile them to death.
Yeah, active turn spotlight's not ideal, but if you're looking for those last 2 points in an annihilation mission, then absolutely that's a way of doing it. And I think that's a pretty common risk one. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just I've been using the pitcher more with the Cyber Ghost, and it's at +6 or just before 16 inches, it's a +3 to yeet it. So it's pretty easy to get a repeater where you want it to be.
Yep, absolutely. And then you've got the ability to, and if you can catch other guys in it too, it has utility outside of what you've set it to do too, right? So a repeater can be a great way of slowing down the counterattack and getting you that lieutenant kill maybe.
But otherwise, my best lieutenant kills have been with the tag.
I was gonna say climbing Zeta.
Climbing Zeta. You just find the tall building, you climb up on top of it, you try to kill the other people that can see you on the way there, and you just kind of skirt the edges, take advantage of your really long range, and 5 dice.
I'm so glad I gave you that Zeta. Like, I'm so glad that like I happened to have like a Psyocast once. I was like, I'll just give you this metal one because it's so fun to start Infinity with a piece like that, and not just any piece, but like a piece that can climb buildings. You know, like a lot of like tags when you first use them, they're a little less mobile than that guy is, and that guy is a lot of fun. You got to experience what it is to go buck wild with a tag early on, and even like that you're considering that for lieutenant kill shows that you've gotten your mind around the fact this guy can just climb up walls.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky when you get close to people because he's only got heavy riot stoppers as a melee or like a close range option that's like reliable, but yeah, at range it's kind of insane what he can do.
Yeah, definitely. Five dice naturally is a big offensive gunfighter pool. I was actually thinking about Owen's tag as my regard, just spraying mines in every direction to spec firing mines onto the rooftop next to that guy, and then super jumping in the line of fire of him to make him activate.
Yeah, but otherwise, like without 12 Armada, I'm not sure what would be a good piece to like run up and murder something.
You've got your Varangian Shona combo. That might be able to get up there because she could super jump. You could spec fire a smoke grenade on top of that lieutenant, and then super jump into it with him. Like you got, I think that's the trick, right? Is you looking at your list and thinking laterally as to like who can go on an adventure in this army. Your Deltas can do it
as well.
Yeah, Hippolyta. Yeah, she super jumps too.
Because she super jumps. She's got the Glips grenades, so she can hide from everything.
She's got a built-in Varangian. Yeah, she doesn't need she don't need no people in fur hats to come bring her smoke grenades. She brought her own, and she packed them for every job too because she's got Eclipse, so she doesn't care about anybody.
Yeah, and she's got 2 wounds, so.
Yeah, she's a cool hunting option. The only downside, of course, is you're risking that high point value model to go and do that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So these, and I think it's worth thinking about the fact that these final 2 objective points might be the easiest to achieve if you're really committed to dedicating a unit to like earning them. And even better, thinking about how you do them mentally will prepare you to keep your opponent from doing the same thing, right? So like thinking about the ways you might try to get to their lieutenant is going to prepare you for seeing all the ways that your opponent might try and do the same thing back at you, which is really, really useful when you're reading through the mission. All right, so knowing the goals in the mission adds another dimension to the two things we've already discussed in previous episodes, like roles in running an army list and creating fire teams. This becomes really important in an event where you'll know them beforehand. You're going to know what your missions are beforehand, and you can even bring an alternate army list. So just like having roles in your army, knowing what units you've decided to bring to a mission specifically to earn those objective points will keep you clear and focused and able to be decisive during the game, right? You know who your pieces are. They're going to go hunt the lieutenant. You know what your options are for bringing guys back to try and get those points back. And in this section, you're also going to find references to classified objectives and high value targets. So when you're reading the ITS mission pack, this same goals section, like your mission objectives, is where you're going to find what and how many HVT how many classifieds you might have. And of course, your rules for high value targets are going to be in this packet as well. And we'll elaborate them in the future, but mechanically, you'll benefit from asking yourself the same kind of questions about them prior to the game. So even though those missions are generated on the fly, and you don't necessarily know what they're going to be beforehand, you'll know what they possibly could be, and asking yourself the same kind of questions of who in my army can do these things and why did I include them to try and do these jobs will let you try and hopefully go and do those things in the future. So any questions about that, Dan? I mean, you've played a lot of war games, so the goals part is, I mean, it's pretty obvious the what you're doing, especially in Annihilation, but the how you parsed it and how you look at your models in your army to know how to do those goals. How do you feel about that after your first? I think you're like 10 games in now. How does that feel as like a learning curve?
It's pretty good. What I like about Infinity is that like you can shift orders back and forth. Like, so I've been playing a lot of Malifaux. And it's like you have kind of the same thing. You need different models for different things. And but the thing is like, depending on what your opponent brings, in Infinity, you can shove orders to specific models to make them excel at what they were brought to have. And so having the toolkit of models is almost more important. But then having backups as well. I don't know, it's hard to explain.
I think what
my thoughts right here.
I think what I heard, I'm just trying to mirror it back, is because you can go more than twice with the same guy or hop between guys and go back to them, you just have more options. Because like having played Malifaux myself, you get a number of actions per model, but once those actions are done, there's no going back to them. So in a given turn, if you try and do something with a model, it doesn't work. You don't really have a ton of backup plans except for going to a different model. Whereas in Infinity, you can go laterally, you can come back, you can activate the same model again after you've done something else and change the board state. Like you can kind of hop around. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's funny because I will often in my games be super inefficient with I'll do this and then that solves that problem. And then I'll find a better way to solve that problem and then I'll double solve it.
Right.
Just so it's better on my turn.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, because the second way I solved it is better, because I killed the model this time without risking anything. I didn't actually
dead.
Because I didn't actually have to do all that other prepping, and then those guys could have done more things. And it's like I need to slow down and like figure out the most efficient way how to solve that instead of just, okay, this guy needs to do this because he's there. And it's like, no, I can step up and walk out and then walk over and then walk over again and then go on the rooftop and then murder that guy across the board. But because the one guy's in front of me, I go, well, I have to deal with him. And then next turn I can do that. I was like, no. Because you have all those extra orders, there's just so much flexibility of what you can do. And so choosing which model or which orders and how to do things in the order of doing them is like extremely important, how to get like efficient. And it's really cool how I can see how I can actually become a lot better at the game of, oh, I could have done that differently, I could have done that differently. And it's so it's really fun building lists with those options to be able to solve puzzles that your opponents throw in your face.
Yeah, I think once you get past the like first few games of like I have no idea who should be doing what and how, and you start looking at the missions and going, after the game's over, doing that sort of like Monday morning quarterback and being like, yeah, I did it this way, but I could have had like 3 extra orders if I did it that way. That's when the game starts to open up. And that's when you start looking at the mission pack, or you look at going to an event and playing 3 missions in a day, and you start to actually kind of be like, oh, so this is my list that could do 2 of these missions, but I definitely want my other list to be able to do this third one. There's a certain amount of like your brain kind of starts to accept that there isn't one sort of path to victory, and that after it's over, it's really useful to kind of break down how you got the result that you got and come at it maybe a different way next time.
And it's a lot of it's like trying out new models because the game is so proxy friendly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like when you play with new, like it's like, okay, I brought this model to solve this problem, but then you forget about the rules of that model because it's new, and so just having the repetition and playing those models really helps. I was like, oh yeah, smoke. I have smoke. I can use smoke.
Yeah, and changing out 1 or 2 models in a list in Infinity is a huge difference. I think that's one of my favorite hobby parts of it too, is that between a week, if you paint 2 different models for your list, or acquire a new model for your list, or change out a single like profile, you get a totally different game. Like the whole game changes all of a sudden. You just have access to new tools that you maybe didn't have before.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go to parameters then. So now that you know what you're playing for, you need to absorb any special conditions the mission dictates. In almost every season of the Infinity tournament system, you're presented with small extras that can be present, and they can give you both opportunities and challenges. And again, let's look at Annihilation. So when you get to the scenario special rules, in Annihilation, there's 2 big ones. Killing is defined. So killing is troopers are considered killed by the adversary when they enter the dead state or they're in a null state, so with a null tag at the end of the game. So if you're unconscious or dead, or in this Shazvasti seed soldier state, then you are considered killed. Any troopers that have not been deployed in the game table as a model or marker at the end of the game will be considered to be killed as well. So if you stay in hidden deployment the whole game and forget to come out, you're considered dead. And if you're a parachutist or AD and you don't arrive on the table until the end, you're considered dead. So that's simply to like define the win condition, right? So what counts as being dead for the first 2 sections of the objectives. The second one's no quarter, and this is a big deal. There's no retreat. Everyone fights to the death in this one. So the retreat state, where once you go below 25% of your starting army size, so below 75 points of army points remaining, you typically can no longer perform actions with the attack tag, and you start impetuousing towards your table edge, I think, still, or at least you can't advance towards the enemy. Unless you have veteran or religious. You don't use those rules. So in this mission, you just play until everyone is dead, which is a big difference to a normal game of Infinity, and a pretty key differential for the parameters for the game. The HVT and classified deck aren't used, as we said earlier, so no having to worry about that. And then the 2 other big ones are, there is a low gravity area, and the low gravity area is the zone of operations, so the whole table is a low gravity area. Movement restrictions are not applied. However, all troopers that have either terrain 0G or terrain total skills automatically gain super jump. And that can be a big surprise in certain armies. Like my Marut all of a sudden has super jump because it's got terrain total. Lots of units have terrain 0G, and it doesn't typically amount to much in a game of Infinity, but it definitely can when all of a sudden you got guys that can just jump over walls or jump up high to see things in this specific mission. So that's a big parameter for the mission. So is there anything that would change in your army, Dan? Like, is there any guys you have that have either terrain total or 0G that would all of a sudden just be like teen wolfing their way around?
I think the bronze has terrain total.
I think he does too.
So that just makes him a lot more mobile.
Yeah,
which is nice. And he's tough, and he can give him some fun guns and some fun profiles.
Sure does. And he's a size 2, so he's getting that height advantage too to jump up, right? Because all that stuff in the new FAQ would apply to him. Yeah. So anybody who's big and has that terrain skill will be able to do it. Who else?
I'm not sure who else has terrain total.
Or 0G. I'm looking at.
I can think of a super
Yokas, maybe
Oniwaban. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, super jumping Oniwaban could definitely be cool. I was thinking, not Cuervo. No, he doesn't have terrain total. I was thinking of the Nyokas. I thought they had it.
So what's really great is what I love about the army builder is that you can like look up
by skill. Yeah. So all the Nyokas have terrain 0G, so they can do it too.
It means you can have a link team of super jumping.
Yep.
Yeah.
flying Nyokas all of a sudden. I can't think of maybe the Crushers. Yep, Crushers can all do it too. All the Crushers with their little bots, which is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, look at that.
I'm not sure they don't have bots. They have a forward deployment. I'm thinking of
Raptors.
The Raptors could do it.
The
Can
Raptors
they?
have terrain 0G.
There you go. So all your space bros, because remember you're the naval police department, so you're supposed to be out in space in the spaceship. So all these guys have 0G terrain, which means all of a sudden like all of your like fighty infantry can super jump.
The Deltas have terrain total.
There you go. So now you've got super jumping parachutists and folks who can come in the sides. Flight Officer Agnes Ferreira does as well.
The
Or
Razors
SMG.
do.
So quite a bit actually.
Nauf, the outlaw sniper.
Yeah.
I mean, the super jump on a drop infantry means that you can drop yourself out of line of fire,
Yeah.
like right up against a building, and then jump up on the side of the building and kill that lieutenant who's prone on the rooftop.
Yeah. And you can stick Nauf on a building and have him just jump up in the air and shoot with his Burst 3 sniper rifle and MSV1. Nauf is great. Nauf is really cool, actually. I forgot you got Andromeda. She does not have any of that, though. Super jumping Andromeda would be bananas, be off the chain. All right, so again, something to consider. All of a sudden, when you go into this mission, right? Dan's got a bunch of units that can fly just out of nowhere. Just totally changes how they can operate over the course of the game. Which is why prepping for the game, it's not just important to look at a mission rule like that and know what you can do, but you really need to look at your opponent's courtesy list and look for that skill all of a sudden to know who can fly, especially if it's like a tag. You don't want to get surprised all of a sudden by a flying tag. I can think of a couple of my armies. Like the big one obviously was the Marut with his MSV2. So all of a sudden you have the Marut just like flying towards you. But there's a few other ones that would also have it. And if they were across the table from you and you didn't realize it, and then all of a sudden they were just in your business when you thought you were safe and they were going to be on ground floor, that could be a huge deal. So like, geckos, all of a sudden those guys can go flying. Have a Harris of geckos and a nomad team go flying after you.
A Sphinx.
The Sphinx, yeah, the Sphinx can now super jump. That's huge. It can climb. Plus, it's pretty mobile already, but super jump.
Just open the door even more.
Just let it fly. Why not? Just go flying. I think there's gonna be lots, but it's more just be aware, and look at those skills. And the last one is the defensive turret F13. And that is that you get a free little marker. It's a free little sentry gun. BS 10. It's got total reaction. Can only make BS skills and discovers, I believe. It's got a 360 visor. And it's just a free model that's in your faction or in your unit. And it doesn't require an order. It just sits there and reacts. Doesn't give up any points if it dies, but if it kills one thing, it's done you a favor and earned you towards your directed points. And those are the key changes to the mechanics for Annihilation. And that's all of those basically are going to change not just your force composition, but the composition of what's coming in after you. So those are kind of like your operating parameters that you're going to have for the game. And I think it's important. It's just as important to read those before thinking about writing your list, if you're going to an event that's going to include this mission, as reading the objectives, because you might, Dan, change what you're going to include based just on the fact that all of a sudden in this mission, guys are going to super jump. And in the ITS pack, there's a bunch of low gravity area missions. I think 6 of the missions have low gravity, 6 have no gravity, and then 6 don't have that extra. So I know a bunch of them could have that mission objective in it.
Instinctively, I'm thinking more suppression because people could be just jumping over crap at me. Defensively, it was I gotta prepare for people just jumping over.
Take more arrow pieces,
but also being able to spread out. Yeah. But then also, it's those models that I might not have brought all of a sudden are quite useful. And a jumping sniper I never even thought about.
Look on roofs. Yeah, absolutely.
Luckily, Owen gave me a Nuff model, so
Nuff is. I like Nuff. It's when you realize that his DA shots are now burst 3, and he can triple tap with MSV1. And he's got mimetism. He mod stacks back, and he's relatively cheap. for a sniper rifle. He is going to eat a big chunk of your SWC, but there's nothing wrong with a burst 3 MSV1 sniper that can just sleep on a roof until he needs to super jump to victory and go
I
kill
often
somebody.
don't have a whole lot of MS or a SWIC anyways. I was in Yoka's. I was like, I'm going to take a heavy rocket launcher because it's only 19 points and 1 SWIC instead of 22 points and 0 SWIC. So I could fit more models in my list.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's a parameters section. Let's talk about preparation. So this is when we start actually looking at doing our lists. So once you've read through and absorbed what you need to accomplish a mission, you need to look at the tools in order to do so and answer those questions within the parameters laid out. And as an example, I wrote my OSSSS list to show what that might look like. So I took an annihilation OSSS list. So the list is, just for those listening, because you can't see the pretty picture that's in the show notes, a Marut Lieutenant with his multi-HMG, and obviously is also going to be super jumping in this, a Proxy Mark 1 engineer with a UDBot, a Proxy Mark 3 with an AP Spitfire, a Naga hacker with a killer hacking device, a Garuda TACbot, a drop bot with a boarding shotgun, 19 points, 2 Dela 3 bots with a combi rifle. They're my toolbox bots with TAC aware and marksmanship, a Simek Rebot FTO, a Diva hacker with a hacking device, and a Daikini paramedic all on a fire team, a little Harris fire team, and then 2 Lamed and a Netrod for 3 orders just sitting in the second pool. So let's lead right in with the big gunfighter, the Marut. It answers a bunch of questions from the beginning. So do you want to kill my lieutenant? Good, he's right here, and he wants to kill you too. He can get. Can he get to you? Well, his terrain total turns him into a super jumping model in this mission. And all the while he's shooting his multi-HMG all the way to dig out the things that can threaten it, right? So he wants to go and kill things fast. He's got a heavy flamethrower and nanopulsar to keep him point defended. And it's a super dangerous lieutenant with MSV. Is your lieutenant a hacker? Do you have a tag? The Naga and the Proxy Mark 3 prepare answers for a variety of those killing missions. The Diva hacker and a Harris with a Daikini paramedic and Simek FTO let you get off all those important spotlights at Whip 15 and ARO, or the active turn. Under my hacking network with the aggressive Daleth and Remeds. So the Daleths are also all repeaters. So my repeater net can advance with attack aware orders, try and get to where I need to see your lieutenant, and maybe bomb him to death with my Diva hacker and my missile bot. Even better, a lot of my orders, like the Lemeds and the Netrods, are incredibly cheap. So losing them is far easier than losing my gunfighters. And there isn't a huge net drain on my victory point total. It doesn't earn my opponent much. So the trade in the order it costs him is super worth it. I don't mind losing my my low point orders because it doesn't give away either of the 2 win conditions that much. And if they're focusing on hunting those orders to try and strip my Marut, then it's not really worth the order they're spending to do so, because it doesn't get them towards their objective points. Is it perfect? No. Of course it isn't. But if I made some choices on the roles everyone's going to play and how that feeds into the mission itself, yeah. And that's what preparing for the mission is. So even if you use the same army list over and over again, you can still ask yourself these questions and answer them with what you already have. And a plan's better than no plan. So even if you're just trying to comfortably play the same army list over and over again, you can still go, okay, well then who's going to do what in this particular game under these parameters to try and do the mission? And you're going to walk up to the table feeling prepared. So what kind of list do you think you would, why don't you noodle for a second, Dan? What kind of list do you think you would take for Annihilation? Let's say you're playing Euro 12. What's a 300-point list you want to take? And why don't you look at that for maybe your JSA? I'm not saying JSA is great for Annihilation, but you can maybe answer some of these same questions.
So I just played Decapitation before I came here, which is similar. There's some HVTs in there, but
trying to kill lieutenants though. Yep.
Kill people, kill lieutenants, whatever, have at her. And the list I brought turns out not the greatest list in the world.
Sure. So what would it have in it?
So I had a couple gangbusters. And then I had 2 razors as well. And so it's just kind of, I could start with like a razor doing a mine layer, and then the gangbusters doing mine layers for the mad traps. And now they know. So it's kind of like you set up this, like, assuming you get to go first or deploy, whatever, you kind of set like this middle area up of like a safe zone for you, where if you want to come into it, you're really gonna suffer. You're gonna eat mad traps, you're gonna eat other shock mines, another Razor in hidden deployment that can chop out and hack stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had Team Sirius that also gets forward deployment. And so I kind of just have this presence kind of in the middle of the board or wherever there's cover kind of thing.
Right.
And so it just makes it hard for them to advance and come kill me.
To keep your lieutenant safe, have like a decent chance of like controlling the midfield.
Yeah, and then as my lieutenant, I had the Alpha, which is kind of a big target on his back to come murder him, but hopefully make it a bit harder to come murder me with all those defenses. And then have a blue coat just kind of hanging out with him, and a Kiata, just like the cheap repeater bot beside him for like defensive hacking. And then I had a couple of Varangians, just for laying down smoke and just cheap trading pieces of guys that they have impetuous, they can get up, and they have a chain rifle, and so just being able to just run up and piece trade or just be efficient with their points.
Try and be a cheap guy that takes someone more expensive with them.
Yeah, and then same thing with the motorized bounty hunter. I brought that. I just wanted to try it out because
I love that 9-point motorized bounty hunter. It's my favorite. It's so cheap. It's so good.
I had a few extra points, so I brought the 11-point one, but it's similar. It's you got the boarding shotgun, so you can just like, and then you can do
a template, yeah.
And then you also have the re-roll on the bounty chart, and who knows, maybe they turn into a different role if they
you get a machine gun. Just roll a 20 on the booty chart. That's all you gotta do. I remember I played a game with Owen. Do you remember this game where my Shaolin monk found a machine gun? Do you
yeah, I remember that.
My Shaolin mark, we were playing something with like a panoply in it, and my 5-point Shaolin mark, who's like BS9, like he's so bad at shooting, just discovers a machine gun in a box and then proceeds to use his impetuous order just to run from like cover to cover and go on suppression, and was just this like nightmare. Like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And then when something that could actually like fight him would pop around a corner, he would just throw a smoke grenade at his own feet and just like disappear. He just go like pocket sand and like just disappear because he had a machine gun. It was so stupid. I love when you find a machine gun in the booty thing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And then I had an Oko. I had the Ford Observer bot, just because I hate camo markers, and if they put a bunch of camo markers in my area, I want to be able to reveal them and deal with them efficiently, and then have a proper defense instead of just being afraid of them.
And why not lean into the free stuff from this ITS pack? Like, why not get the tech? It's an extra order. It's marksmanship. It's a bunch of things. And they're AVA too. You should have 2 Okos. Okos are amazing.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
Oh, a lot of them are. That's why one's got 2 Rafiks with his Magariba guard, because they're AVA too. That's why I'm thinking about buying another Bailiff remote pack. Because if 1 free order is good, 2 free orders is really good.
Yep. And then I got then I got a Cyber Ghost as a hacking device plus, and then a Kappa as a hacker in the back, and then an Epsilon with a heavy machine gun. And so I don't have like crazy amounts of armor piercing or anything to like take out like crazy heavy troops, but I have a lot of stuff to shut down the heavy troops with all the hacking and all the repeating. So that's what actually happened. I was able to isolate a bunch of his heavy troops, including his lieutenant. So it just makes it really hard for him to advance, and it doesn't kill them, but it shuts them down while I kill the other stuff, and then I can focus on it later and kill the heavy troops, but just really reduce. And it's more of like a survival mission of like not dying until he critted me on 3s, and then that was sad.
What's interesting too is your points are well spread out. That's something else that's worth noting. Owen does this a lot with his hack army. Is you don't have anything that's really a big point sink here. So there isn't like a big juicy target to get ahead on objective points, right? Like, there's a lot of 20 to 30 point fighters that can all do like a decent job of like maybe trading a piece or setting up a defensive network or being useful, but you haven't really put a ton of your eggs in one basket. No, and annihilation, that means you can, that's actually a really good way of answering that question. How are you going to like basically deny your opponent getting ahead on points, early or quickly or efficiently? And it's through spreading your points out across the table. Like my list's Marut puts 1/3 of my army into a single model. So yeah, I've effectively protected 1, 2, 3 objective points. because if you can't get to 250 if the Maroon's still alive, right? So if the Maroon's not dead at the end of the game, you've effectively locked out 3 out of 10 points because you can't kill a lieutenant and you can't get to 250, right? Because I got 100 points locked in there. But if the vice versa, if they die, if my opponent can kill that Maroon, I've given away 2 for the lieutenant kill, and I've given away the 1 base objective point. So I've given away that same 3 points immediately, just in a single model dying. So I'm gambling the other way. So I think it's interesting that your list does the opposite basically and spreads the points around, so there isn't like a single juicy one order just got me this many objective points like target.
Yeah, it turned out pretty good. Like the Epsilon with the heavy machine gun and smoke grenades means that you can probably root out anything that's poking out. And
then you get to see it too because of the Climb Plus.
Well, I got Climbing Plus. I can get anywhere. I got MSV2, so I can see through the grenades fully, the smoke grenades fully. Well, I can impose. He just had a bunch of MSV1, and so he had still lots of negatives as I was shooting him across the board. And then obviously optimizing range bands. And then yeah, it was good. And then the razors are the other bigger point sinks. There's like only 3 models over 35 points in this list.
Mm-hmm.
No, 2.
Over 30, yeah.
Over 30.
Yeah.
And so then the mine layer is nice, just good defensive thing. But then it's just like he's MSV -6. He's hard to kill. And the other one was in hidden deployment. So again, if he comes up, I get more hacking. But if not, I can just kind of hold him over to the last turn and then reveal him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that
surprise
work?
attack MIM 6 boarding shotguns, which have train total, by the way, so they all super jump now too.
Hey,
yeah, if you're going second in an annihilation mission, these razor units could be absolute nightmares because your opponent might think they're safe, and if you put them somewhere near where their advance is going to be, like they have to come here to come fight me, you could very easily hunt a few pieces at super close range with really bad modifiers, right? If they don't have MSV, you're looking at -12 easy with surprise attack, mimetism, and cover, and you're walking in with an 8 with a boarding shotgun and just going like, click clack.
Yeah,
this is gonna get very training day very quickly.
That's good. They also have decharges.
Sure do.
Or some of them. So yeah, having the decharge of like, because there's lots of immobilization with O12, and so including the hacking against like heavy stuff, and so it's like, hey, your root's over there, but then I'm like, pop out.
I also have shock, like the fact they have shock mines in mine layer is a huge deal.
Yeah. So it seemed like it was a cool list. And it was more killy than I thought, and then it was definitely, I mean, once they get into your Varangians, but like when all the stuff started getting murdered, I was like, oh, that's like actually not a lot of points. Like he killed all the little cheap stuff that was up front, and I barely lost anything.
And you haven't lost any vigil points, yeah.
And having 3 killer hackers and being able to combine order turn 3 into smiley faces, and then just run around the board and just like make it that much harder for them to kill.
Keeps those points safe, yeah. Keeps it really hard for your opponent to then get the strike back at you. Definitely,
exactly, yeah.
You have any thoughts on that, Owen? On like prepping a list, or like what kind of list you would take to an annihilation game where it's just kill and don't die and kill that lieutenant?
Yeah, I think I went about it a different route with JSA, because it's so easy to kill people now. I feel like there's the tools that like MSV1 now being able to see through smoke and stuff, but yeah, my list is I'm just gonna hide. I'm just gonna hide, and every time you try and dig at one of my models, I'm gonna kill you, or at least take one with me. And so the list is Shinobu Lieutenant with 2 Oni Wabons, with 3 Ninja Hackers, with 3 Ryukin rocket launchers, and the Pangolin FTO.
I mean, that is a legit like tactic. You're thinking about, well, you can't score 4 of these points if I don't die. If I keep my casualties to sub 75 points, you don't get any points at all for killing, like period. Nope. And then if I could just trade up to over that, then I get over the line. It's probably not a win big 10-point win one, but you've basically locked your opponent out, and then you're trying to like score that lieutenant kill and then creep your own points ahead.
The fact that you could top of one coordinate surprise heavy rocket launch or something.
Sure.
Like there's no defense against that if they set up poorly, or like you wait, you go, I'll go second, sure. Walk forward, I do nothing. Walk forward, I do nothing. Walk forward, I do nothing. I do nothing. I do nothing. I do nothing. There's my little
Surprise.
robot. He's sitting in my home base. Do you want to go for him? Okay,
Yeah.
3 of these camo markers turn into ninjas hackers, and that one's a killer hacker.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
It's
and like
it's very few games of Infinity where it's not advantageous to go first, but when you've got 2/3 of your army at hidden deployment, it's the
2/3.
one. Sorry,
9 out of 10 models are hidden infiltrators.
Sorry, yeah. I didn't think you got hidden deployment. They get camo on the Ryukins. They don't have hidden deployment, do they? They just have camouflage. I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
camouflage
that one.
Yeah. Okay,
They have
so
just
you do have
camo.
models. You do have
Yeah,
models on the table. They know where they are. Yeah, I didn't think that.
But they're also mine layers.
So, and they're mine layers. Yeah, so you have multiple markers.
So there's
down
6
too.
camo markers in your deployment. Some ninjas that are going to be hidden. Some Oniwabans that'll be hidden. Shinobi will be hidden. And then in the middle of the 6 camo markers is the pangolin, just being a repeater.
Being like, who are you? I don't know. I brought a bunch of friends. I don't know what they are.
I have a shotgun. Come and see.
I'm just a robot going for a walk.
Yep.
What do I know?
I don't know what's happening.
I'm just a simple country robot.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Owen took a very lateral thinking way of approaching the mission, and instead of looking, I think that's really useful. So when you go back to that first question of what are my goals, Owen decided his goals were not die instead of kill, like not die and trade up every single time someone comes near me instead of kill. I love that you went upside down on the scoring priority there and made a list that leaned into your faction strengths and just took the opposite road. So like I said, I don't think it's gonna be high scoring, but it's most people will not have any idea what to do when that happens, right? Like, how do you safely advance in? I mean, I think the only threat to your list there is that everyone's got access to attack-aware sensors, which will eventually just pop you open.
Yeah, they might. And then all they have to deal with are a bunch of smoke grenade hacking camo submachine guns.
I'm just saying.
That's what I mean.
You lose the initiative. Yeah.
You play immediately into the I'm going to then suppress. I'm going to suppress. And now I'm a camo marker suppressing in cover. Come dig me out.
Or mimetism was roasting in cover, yeah. I think it's interesting, but like you would need to use that tool so specifically. And if you just neutralize that tool, like let's say with those rocket launchers, you know what I mean? Like if you do get to go first, or even if like you lose the roll and they choose to go for second because for whatever reason they do and you're forced into it, you just go kill those sensor bots. You just send one to go kill the sensor bots, and then they're completely.
If you can get 2 Oniwabans to trade up, you could just win off the top.
Yeah, exactly. And then they just go back into cover or go back into camo and just go for a scuttle. Just go scurry away.
Yep.
So the last question then, or the last part here, the second last part is the table. And there's a saying that the third player in every game of Infinity is the table. And I've always found this more or less holds true. Taking the table and the mission in combination can often set the foundation between a really successful game of Infinity and a really frustrating one. So does one side have a lot of elevation that you can have your lieutenant on? Are there a lot of long fire lanes? How much side-to-side obstruction is there on the edges of the table to make it hard to parachute in there? Have you and your opponent defined what the terrain is, like that clump of trees over there? What terrain keywords does it have? It's really important to clear all this up now, and it's better to know and plan for it than to have to ask later. One of my little TO notes here is write the keywords for terrain in Sharpie on the bottom of any like clumps of trees or rocks or whatever, so you can just front load all that to your players. The table is like the last but probably most important thing when you roll up to a mission, because right before you start playing, you're going to make that roll off, and looking at the table and trying to like absorb it and what's there is a big deal. Like, especially if people are using standardized terrain. If you're using those cardstock Infinity buildings or like the Bandua Q buildings, there's some terrain that pops up over and over again in Infinity. And if you know certain things about that terrain, like the fact that your tags are taller than it, then you might know a lot about the mission you're going into just by looking at the table. Like Owen having a size 8 Magariba guard, if he looks at certain boxes, he just knows, I don't even need to climb. I can just walk wherever I want. It's like there's no terrain on this table at all.
I'm prone on this rooftop. Be a shame if I hopped up on this box and shot a mine at that rooftop.
That's right. Yeah. I walked over and it's not even like you walked onto it. You just walked over it. And during that hurdle, you were elevated that box plus your base height. And then all of a sudden you could shoot a mine wherever you wanted because you could see the tops of all these buildings.
Yeah.
There's a lot to know about a table. And early on in your Infinity games, I think people tend to not take just like the 10 seconds you might need to look at the two sides and think like, I'm going to roll off. Do I want to choose table edge? Because it might actually be important that I choose which side I'm sitting on here. And my army might really need one or two things like just high rooftops to put my two Fusiliers, one of whom is a lieutenant, or my two Ghulams, one of whom is an NCO, one of whom is a lieutenant, on top of. And I don't really have a really safe place if I don't get that. So there's a lot to think about. Have you encountered that yet, Dan? Have you had a table where the terrain really mattered, or you encountered like a scenario where you wish you'd picked a different side?
Definitely. It was like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just take the side. And you're like, oh, there's like not a great place to hide, especially because I'm going second. So it's like if you're choosing like sides and deployment, it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, well, where am I hiding? Especially if you're going second, it's like, where is a defensive position? And I haven't put as much thought as I need to in that. Where I'm like, oh, I'll just find something, whatever. And then you're like, oh, I really wish I was on the other side of the board right now. It's like sometimes there is a winner and a loser on the board.
Yeah, and well, I think it's because the last thing that's going to happen here, the last thing we're talking about part 5 is turn order and deployment. You should have an idea of what's going to happen if you win that roll or if you lose that roll, right? If you get to pick one of these two things, what's the most important thing? If you really don't want this side of the table, right, then you lose that roll. Or even if you win that roll, it's real tempting to go like, do I just want to go first and then I don't care what side of the table I'm on? There might be a real like decision to make there. And so absorbing what that table looks like before you make that roll, I think, is really important. Because while the table and the mission can often make that role like come into question, inarguably there's a lot of debate as to whether or not it's best to pick turn or deployment after the lieutenant role. In an aggressive game like Annihilation, for instance, it can very often be incredibly powerful to take the lead and kill other aggressive pieces quickly, like at setup. Some armies, however, can build powerful passive killing fields of deployment, like the one that you just talked about, Dan, and force the enemy to spend a valuable turn trying to dig out small cost pieces to cross the table to their actual targets. This mission doesn't reward board placement of your pieces just being alive or dead. It will very much be determined by your army and faction and the table itself whether or not you want to take the lead, and your lieutenant role might not even go your way, so you have to have it in mind that you might have to go second, and don't let it discourage you either way. But having absorbed that table, you're going to be able to be better informed for what happens after you've made that roll and which of the two choices you get to make. So I think I already know the answer to this question from Owen. You pretty much always want to go first in Annihilation, I think, because you're very much of the lieutenant, or is it the Sergeant Zim thing, is the enemy cannot push a button if you disable their hand. The enemy can't kill you back if they're dead first.
I don't need any doctors. You don't have any models left.
That's right. you just upended my assumption about that by writing a JSA list in 5 minutes that did the opposite of that. But most times I've seen you play an aggressive mission like this, you've gone first. So what do you think about that turn order choice?
Yeah, it's gonna depend so much on which way did you decide to go. Like, are you gonna play a defensive list that can absorb an enemy like powerhouse, like things like a Zeta that can come at you? Like, are you gonna just die if that attacks you? Like, or is your army like, I feel that if I was playing Dan's list and he had that Zeta, I could probably sit back and play my JSA army and make him waste his first turn, where he runs around and he places mines and he goes on suppression and stuff like that. And maybe he tries to kill my little robot. But for me, deployment was more important because I want to make sure that I got my camo markers where I wanted them to be, There wasn't any issue. He didn't get to play stuff if I didn't want him to. Like maybe there's a rooftop that's a really good setup point. So instead of going and hitting deployment, I just put a marker on there and be like, yeah, you can go find it if you want, but now you can't put a marker there. Good luck. Things like that. I can see there being a lot of value in that. Or just kill them. Go first. Bring the Zeta and kill them. Like that. It's just as good. It's just as good.
Or kill the things that are really going to threaten your expensive piece. You know, like my Marut that can super jump all of a sudden is going to try and take out those high AP dangerous pieces that I know exist in X or Y army if it's across from me. Yeah. That OSS list that I took is going to want to go first. Going to want to go first, extend the hacking net, so that if you are coming into it, I can throw out those arrow spotlights and use my missile bot maybe later on the turn, and then you know go with that Marut and go kill the things that are dangerous to you. Go with that proxy mark through the AP Spitfire and like set up somewhere. You know what I mean, to try and hunt down whatever the enemy armor piece is because it's got an AP Spitfire. Go and send that Garuda boarding shotgun to his death. You know, like I'll just combat jump on top of this building next to this Fusilier. I don't know if he's a lieutenant or not, but it sure looks like he is. And then hope I live that round, or you know, make him like spin to face me and that just boarding shot him with the next order. So there's a reason in certain armies with certain units to go first and try and just take that lead. Because if you can assassinate, like if you can top one kill lieutenant with a 19-point Garuda, your annihilation is going to be it's real hard to come back from a lost lieutenant turn on turn one, right? If you don't have like a chain of command model or something to like hold your army together, or if you're not playing Morats, right, where everyone's a veteran, it's really hard to regain that sort of like momentum after you've had a really bad turn one. So there is a like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, Mike Tyson kind of thing in a mission like Annihilation. But I think Owen's exactly right, and it really depends on the table, the army across from you, and what you know they can do, and what you've chosen for your list to do. So between the list I wrote, the list Dan wrote, and the list Owen wrote, I think you've got my list really wanting to go first, Owen's list really wanting to go last or second, and then Dan being able to really flex in between because he's got all his points spread out and he's doing like a midfield mosh pit where he's going to try and bleed out trades basically to come in somewhere in the middle. And so you have three really interesting ways of looking at it.
Yeah, I've played too many games where first turn, either I just demolish them because they just weren't prepared, and they go like, "Oh, I'll just hide in the back," and then my Zeta goes blah, 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 and I'm like, hee. And it's just like, okay, the game it's not over, but it's looking pretty good. Or it happens to me where I'm like, oh, I go second. Oh, my core of Nyokas in the bronze that I was really excited to use got eaten, or just it was like, oh, because the terrain wasn't that good, and so I deployed in this spot where it was all clumped up and it probably wasn't the best spot, and then he held back a model which was for deployment and melee specialist crap, and he just murders me. I was like, oh,
I really should have deployed on the other side. I really should have just not been lazy and picked my army up and walked around the other side of the table and not said, you can just stay there, no problem. So right? Like I'm sure it won't make any difference at all. Oh wait, it made the entire difference of the whole game.
Yeah. So it's like I really want to build lists that can withstand a turn one from the enemy. More so than I want to build lists that if I get turn one, I can completely obliterate them. Mm-hmm. Because it's like I was planning with like those Nyokas and the bronze, and it was like, okay, we go up, we got like different long range heavy stuff with all the bonus. The bronze got the boarding or the heavy shotgun, so he just wants to pop around corners and just like blast people away. And I'm like, I got immunity total and all this stuff and a couple wounds. I was like, I'll survive something and I'll murder the crap out of you. So it's just kind of like I was really excited for all those things to just go murder everything in the murder mission, but I didn't have any defenses, and then I ended up going second. And I got taken apart by Owen.
Yeah, and like a little setup choice early on in the mission basically allowed all of that to fall apart.
Yeah, so it's like you kind of really need, which is really cool, which is the more I'm playing, the more I realize that you want a more kind of balanced army in those ways, or you need to plan for those defenses at least somewhat.
Or that's just how you play. That's you know what I mean. Like that's
you just risk the roll.
Stylistically, yeah. Well, you're enjoying playing an army that can flex back and forth between offense and defense, and I think that's a big like growth sort of thing. You know what I mean? When you start looking at your army and going like, well, can it do both those things? Can I switch gears in between aggressively attacking the enemy and forcing like these like engagements that are in my favor in the middle, where I'm already in like a prepared position? You're doing these like prepared position lists. I really liked that list you just kind of like shared from your previous game from playing Decapitation, because you have like a bunch of sort of like predetermined board control built into it, and you're not going the traditional route of like the hitting pieces. You got a couple of like mid-range hitting pieces instead, and then lots of like individual operators all doing their own thing. It's a neat way of looking at the game, and it's just you leaning into your faction strengths, right? There's no fire teams in there. It was just about individual pieces off doing like a specific job in a specific role.
Yeah, and with the alpha, you get that extra command token, so you could do that one extra combined what's the when everyone activates at the same time? What do you call that? Coordinated order. Them group orders. So you just get more of that to be able to move up and do what you need to do. So it's like semi link teams or fire teams.
And you found yourself a list that you're comfortable playing into lots of different missions, probably. Like that's the thing is like
probably
you find I found over time there were certain elements I would repeat between lists, and then I would have these like modules that I would swap in and out of them. So like in a mission, you don't hyper prepare for one mission, but you come up with a list that's good for like two. You know, if you're playing like 4 missions in a tournament, you'd have a list that's maybe good for 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4. And then the second list might be the exact same list with just like 3 models switched out. You know what I mean? Like flipped over so that you're more prepared for whatever that 4th mission is that you're going to play, or that 5th mission that you're going to play. And I found that over time, I get comfortable with knowing what certain combinations of models or things can do. And they become these sort of like building blocks. My lists turn into building blocks. And when I prepare for a mission, individual mission, I kind of slot in and slot out these new sort of like chunks of the army list that are useful when you're playing those specific missions. So the last step is you play the game, you belly up and do it. You made your choices, you're as prepped as you can be, and you throw down, you play your mission. And there's so many missions in the ITS packet, and they change every year. Going through all of them could be like an entire season of podcasting for us. So instead, this episode is designed to focus on one of the original rulebook missions that has a variation in this ITS season. It's 14 at the time of recording this. And also understanding mission packs is like a whole other discussion. So in the future, when you're trying to write 2 army lists to have to perform multiple missions back to back all on the same day, you got a host of other things to consider, and that could be another entire episode. So I kind of alluded to it at the end, like how do you start to parse a list that can do multiple things in the same day? But again, that could be a whole other thing. So we're very aware that this is us breaking down basically like the OG mission of Infinity, and trying to prepare you to look at those things. But you would ask yourself the same kind of questions at all time. You look at the goals, right? You look at the parameters. You look at how you're going to like prep to do those 2 things under those conditions. You look at the table, and then you make that turn order and deployment choice, and then you belly up and play. And if you follow that process, like pre-game going into a tournament, and then just ask yourself those questions every time you play a mission, you'll be better prepared to do it. And you can absorb that post game, and hopefully you can get to that state that Dan talked about tonight, where you can break down your decisions after a game, and like be able to look back and go like, maybe there's a better way for me to do this. And the next time you play that mission, or a mission that's like it or has a similar parameter, you've got a better prepared plan.
Yeah, mostly it's during the mission where I'm like, crap, I should have done that. But you know, the dice can fail you. Like I was like,
yes.
I gotta throw a smoke.
Yeah.
I rolled an 18. I needed a 17. Well, let's try to throw another smoke. Oh, a 20, eh? Well then.
I want to talk about I actually want to talk about that in the next episode. I'm not going to spoil what the topic for the next episode is going to be, but I think that there's a very important, now that we're at the stage of like, if we're doing these episodes temporally and we've gotten to the point where you're actually playing a game, I think the next one's going to be an interesting discussion. I think the next one's going to be a lot less scholarly and a lot more emotional, and I'm excited to get to it. Did you have any final thoughts, Owen, before we wrap this up?
I mean, it summed it up pretty well. My perspective on scenarios is as well like just be aware of what your opponents are doing. Like you're gonna need to learn your opponent's factions because the scenarios are just like the guidelines. And it's all well and good that you can come in with this plan list and you're like, everything is optimized and I have an excellent list and I will succeed at the mission. And then your opponent's like, but did you consider that I have super jump now? So like really remember that that's going to come up.
Yeah, yeah. That courtesy list thing is in events for a reason, right? Being able to see like just the it's like the what can I see in front of me and what do I know about it? You'll be able to have it at a glance, and absorbing those parameters, you avoid those unfortunate surprises where flying tags start falling from the sky.
Yeah, or the drop troop or the like just assume that everyone you play against has an infiltrating guy who's invisible or a drop troop who can come in from behind or something that can hide at the very back and jump up and shoot you. If you go in with that assumption, you'll be less surprised when it happens.
I remember there was a game I played of War Machine ages ago, and where you're like, I just assume I can die at any time.
Oh,
I'm always playing this game as if there's something I can't see that I don't know about that's gonna kill me at any time. And then I'm just paranoid. I'm just paranoid enough. I'm not too paranoid. I'm exactly paranoid enough about what could possibly happen.
Always be looking behind you. Always be like that gets into how to play the game more, which isn't really this, but very much like when it comes to scenario play, consider as well that like you're gonna need to be it's all well and good that you can do the mission and you can kill pieces and you have a guy who kills pieces, but remember that everyone else also has a guy that kills pieces. Be ready for that.
Yeah, everybody also rolled in this with a plan for how they were going to kill you, just like you rolled into a plan for how you were going to kill them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just talking about War Machine, I remember like because like first turn sometimes crazy things can happen, but usually it's like positioning and you can like, well, if I stay back here, it's impossible for me to die for now, and then I'll move up later to be able to do objectives. But in Infinity, anything can happen at any time. No one's safe ever. It's
boy howdy, are they not? Yeah.
And it's like you can really reduce the odds sometimes, but even when you think you have,
they're never zero.
They're never zero.
Yeah, the odds that you're gonna get killed by a bear right now are low, but never zero.
Welcome to Canada. That's right. That's the most Canadian way we can end this podcast. The odds of death to a bear in Infinity are just like the odds of death to Canada. If you live in Canada, you might be killed by a bear. The odds are never zero.
Yeah. So prepping for missions has definitely made the game a lot more fun for me, of deciding on a mission beforehand, building a list for it, and then playing it, because then you get to see how they've tried to ask questions and like solve your puzzles, and then you get to do yours, and then you kind of learn, and then depending on what faction you're playing, certain things work better than others, but it's just kind of like having either the skewiest thing that no one would be able to handle with, or the all around absorbing, doesn't matter what you're playing, I can deal with it.
Yeah, I think missions are the thing that keep the like solved argument from happening in a game like Infinity, where it's like, well, we've solved this army. This is the best way to make this army, and there will never be an army list as good as this army list, because there's so much that can change mission to mission, and there's 21 missions to play, and like the core missions in this season's ITS document, plus the 4 direct action missions. I think that it's a healthy element of this game that the missions upend what's useful, what's good, what's bad, and keep you sort of on your toes. I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge about Infinity, and I think that you'll gain a lot of enjoyment out of trying to solve the puzzle of each, set of missions you have to play in an event, or each mission sort of case by case as you practice them and play them, because it resets the game board, right? In a literal way of what you're playing for, how you're playing for it, under the conditions you're playing for it, and your opponent's army is like that third component. And then the table itself is the fourth component that makes it different every time. It just keeps the game fresh. I think that's why after all these years I keep coming back to Infinity, is that I never have a stale, oh, here we go again, we're just going to play this mission again kind of experience. Because if you change one thing, whether it's my opponent's army, the setup of the table, or the mission itself, I'm having a totally different type of game. And so I think that embracing the the differences in missions and how that makes Infinity unique as a game is important, and it'll probably up your enjoyment overall of playing. All right, so a few closing things. I just want to thank everybody who has signed up so far for the Tactical Awareness Winter War Tournament in January, the 22nd. I think we just got, while we were literally recording this podcast, we got our 18th confirmed player. So that means we have 2 spots left, which is really exciting. I'm super pumped to be able to do these every quarter, and that so many people are going to be turning out. And so yeah, get registered and confirmed and get your ticket bought if you want to grab those last 2 spots. Then I also want to thank all of our patrons in the patron chat and who gave us feedback on all these episodes. You guys have been fantastic. It's been great hearing from you. There's a whole bunch of our patrons. Bill Dozer's been like painting an army while we did this. Derek Fleetwood's been doing a whole bunch of painting and stuff too. Lots of great feedback, lots of great stuff going on in the patron chat. And also just in our Discord, and also thanking everybody who's in our Discord. We got a lot of great feedback about these episodes so far. And I think they've really enhanced, just like each one afterwards kind of gets more structured and I think more sort of specific and useful, and hopefully can stay up as being content that people can use for a while for getting into Infinity and kind of the order that you do it in. So let us know what you think about how to approach playing missions in Infinity. You can reach out to us again on Patreon, Discord, Facebook, or on Spotify, and there'll be links in the podcast. I want to thank Owen and Dan, my other 2 wise men, for their contributions tonight. And yeah, you guys have a great night. I'm going to go to bed. It's like 1 a.m. here.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Night, everybody.